This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own moves. Carrington. North are in front.
Hello and welcome back once again to North Pod. I am Jason and thank you again for listening. It's now officially, we're past the halfway point of the home and away season for the AFLW and certainly for the North Melbourne side. We've played our sixth match. We're at the end of week 5, so for those of you not across it, there's a bit of a condensed fixture going on where we're getting some extra games in. Well, actually just one extra game per side, but we're still doing that across 10 weeks. Bit of an interesting one, but we are through, and boy, it was a wet game. So we're going to have a chat about that, go through the game, do all the usual stuff, positives, negatives, story of the game, North Podium, the 5 stars, and yeah, have a quick look ahead to next week and what's happening around the league. So yeah, it was like I mentioned, really wet game. The first half was pretty awful to watch, not just because of the conditions, but also because we weren't playing great. It was raining. There was an inch of water sitting on the surface, so it was really tough down in Launceston. But good to get the last of our super condensed fixture out of the way. We still have a 6-day break coming up, so it's not as though it completely opens up, but no more of this really short turnaround stuff. And hopefully, fingers crossed, October is going to bring some better weather with it so that we don't have to worry about playing in these really wet conditions because, yeah, from 6 games, we've probably had, well, certainly 3 games that were shockers and then, yeah, another one that wasn't great either. So hopefully we can leave the bad weather behind us. In terms of team selection, I was a little bit surprised that we didn't change it up a little bit more and potentially rest some other players. Just the only 2 coming out were Lulu Puller and Taylor Gatt, and Gatt was actually out with illness. So Lulu Puller is evidently being managed coming back from injury because she's only played the 1 game and then was back out for this one. I assume because they didn't want her playing back-to-backs straight away. So she was rested and Taylor Gatt was unwell, so she was out. And coming back in were the 2 that were rested for the last game, Jenna Bruton and Kate Sheilor. Yeah, I would have liked to see potentially some more resting. I mean, we'll talk about Emma Kearney as the podcast gets into it, but she's someone that probably would have benefited from having the game off. I understand she is the captain, so that's hard to do, but you know, these are the things that potentially we have to do. And yeah, I mean, Kate Sheilor, you almost could have given her the extra game just because the conditions were so poor. It wasn't necessarily conducive to her playing. Like maybe you're better off resting Emma King or Talia Randall instead, and potentially they thought they didn't need to. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't exactly the best conditions for Kate to come back into. It certainly wasn't a good game for the Tools because of how shocking the weather was. So anyway, that's how we went in. I guess unless players needed the rest, it looks like we've said, go at it and let's make sure we get the win. And I guess you could say thank goodness for that because it certainly wasn't a match that it wasn't comfortable for us. Match result, North Melbourne 3 goals 9-27 defeated Richmond 2 goals 3-15, so a 12-point win in the end despite having 7 more scoring shots. Part of that was the weather and part of it was just us missing a couple of shots. And yeah, like I mentioned off the top, Richmond got off to a good start. We didn't play well in the first half. They kicked the first goal and it looked as though Conti was just going to lead the Tigers to a famous victory, to be honest, in that first half. It was tough going, goals really hard to come by. Sheeran was really sitting on Garner and doing a pretty good job on her, and the weather meant that every goal was worth 3. So, like I said, Richmond got off to a pretty good start and were winning the territory battle, particularly in that first quarter. And then in the second quarter, whilst we weren't necessarily able to get ourselves in front, we were at least able to stop Richmond a little bit and get a little bit of ascendancy, but we were really struggling to hold the ball in. Eventually, we worked our way back, a couple of adjustments in the second half, a couple of brilliant pieces of play, and eventually we ran out 12-point winners, as I said, but probably should have kicked a couple of those points through for goals instead and sealed it earlier. Garner had an opportunity pretty early in the last quarter that she missed, but then she got another one a little bit later on and sealed it for us. So yeah, look, in the end, we did enough when it counted. We got the win, and it was an absolute nail-biter, so we'll take that. But yeah, it certainly wasn't the first half that we wanted, particularly coming off the poor results that we've had or the poor play we've had in the poor weather in the past. I think we would have liked to be a little bit more definitive and decisive, but look, beggars can't be choosers. We'll take the points. And yeah, I think that the fixture does start to open up a little bit more for us now. So, we've put in the hard yards, I suppose you'd say. We've done the hard work. We've got 5 wins and a draw on the board and sitting top of the ladder. Story of the game. So I think ultimately, despite it being a really low-scoring game, mostly due to the weather, I thought our defence held up under immense pressure at times and played really well. Unfortunately, Emma Kearney left the game very early on with a hammy. Like, first couple of minutes, she pinged it. Not sure how serious it is yet. We'll have to wait and see from the scans, but that, obviously leaves a bit of a hole in our defence, both in terms of ball winning and also drive off half back. But I thought Bresnahan brought some great drive in her absence. I thought O'Shea was really good. But most importantly, the tall defensive types, Ferguson, Wright and Birch, stopped almost everything. They worked super well together like they have been all year. But I think for me, this game was one of the best examples of why having these three working together is such an advantage for us. I thought Sarah Wright was fantastic with her spoiling like she has been for the past couple of games. She had 6 1%ers and most of those would have been spoiled. Might have had a smother, but for the most part, that was spoils. I thought Birch sat off the contest really well for most of the game and either was intercepting or was making Richmond kind of divert and go shorter or go around her. She finished up with 6 intercepts for the game and was just always in the hole, always making Richmond's players think differently and figure out a different plan. And if she wasn't doing that, like I said, she was taking marks. And Jazzy Ferguson just did what she does. Wasn't beaten in a 1-1 contest. Just plays that really clumsy over the ball, fumbly on purpose so that she doesn't get caught holding the ball so that the ball can't come out. Or so that she can try and spill it out to our advantage and potentially have Wright or Birch or Bresnahan or Kearney if she's fit out there and able to get rid of it. So I thought the three of them worked really well together and they did it by spending pretty much the entire game on the field. Ferguson and Wright didn't have a break and Libby Birch was on for 98% game time. So you can't argue with that. Defence wins games and I thought they were a massive reason why we were able to win this, particularly early on when Richmond really had some ascendancy. As the game went on, we were able to wrestle a bit of that control back, but I thought in that first quarter, our defence held up really well to only concede the 1 goal. And all of them together I thought worked fantastic. I thought it was one of their best games considering the conditions. Obviously, you're not expecting defenders to have massive numbers, but I thought what they were able to do in working together was really important. I still do have some concerns if we come up against a really tall, strong forward line. We know what Dakota Davidson did against us in the grand final last year, and I probably still have some nightmares about that. But I think holistically, with Birch coming in, it does allow Sarah to play a little smaller at times. It allows Sarah to really focus on the defensive craft and not necessarily be worrying about having to intercept or do much playmaking. And if Bresnahan and O'Shea are playing as well as they are, I think we're in a great spot defensively. So, yeah, for me, it was a great game for the defenders, and you'll see that's going to be reflected in the 5 stars, which I guess we'll move on to now, the 5 stars. Which go towards the North Podium. So this is the 4 best North Melbourne players on the pitch according to me and the best opposition player. And I mentioned her a little bit off the top. She did get sat on by Sheeran, but Jaz Garner, after a slow start, was immense. 24 touches, 1 goal, 12 tackles, which was the most on the field, 4 clearances, a goal assist, and 620 metres gained, also the most on the field, 4 inside 50s. Yeah, she had a pretty hard tag, won a couple of free kicks as a result of that because she was getting tackled high or tackled without the footy. But she really worked into the game, played a pretty good second quarter, and then her second half was super, super impactful. And I thought, for me, the reason that I gave her the 4 was because she was most impactful when the game was on the line, and she kind of, I don't want to say that she won it off her own boot, but the fact that she had the goal assist and she had a goal late does say that she had a big part in those scores that we were able to do or create. Like I said, she kicked the sealer. She missed an earlier chance in the fourth quarter, but took a couple of big marks inside 50, which on a wet day is pretty hard to do. And yeah, I mean, obviously she's a completely different type of player to Conti, but a similar influence late in the game that Conti had early on. Conti was phenomenal early in the game and certainly had some great moments later on, but was unstoppable in the first quarter. And I felt that Jaz Garner was pretty similar in the first quarter. In the last quarter, she was unstoppable. She moved the ball forward, and she was that contested beast that she always is. I think she doesn't mind the wet conditions. She didn't seem to be too fazed by it, and for me, it had to be based on her impact. And then it got a little bit tricky because I think that there were a lot of players that were worthy of sort of the twos and the ones in particular, and potentially the threes. I thought Libby Birch was deserving of the 3. 13 disposals, 4 marks, 6 intercepts, went at 77% disposal effectiveness, which in those conditions is pretty good. And I thought, like I mentioned in Story of the Game, intercepted really well and worked well with Wright and Ferguson. I think her communication's crucial as she sits off the contest and kind of assesses the options and makes sure that everyone's in the right spots. And to be fair, I think really she's kind of getting the votes on behalf of the key defensive tools. I could have given it to Wright or Ferguson too. Their numbers don't look as good. I think that Wright in particular had some really good spoiling and defensive work, but Birch is going to stand out a little bit more because she plays a little bit more proactively with the intercepting. And I thought, like I said, she just sat off the contest. Richmond early on were doing a good job of avoiding her, but as the pressure built, some more of those kicks were being just dumped long that she was swallowing up. And again, she had 4 marks, which was the most for a North Melbourne player on the ground. Again, not a very high number in regulation conditions, but it was torrential down there. So any mark is a good mark in conditions like this. 2 votes, and these are her first votes for the year. I thought Ruby Tripodi was, quite honestly, behind Monique Conti. I think she was the cleanest player on the pitch. 13 disposals, 8 tackles, 6 clearances, and like I mentioned, just had really clean hands, wasn't fumbly. In the second half, she got better and defensively on Conti. I don't actually know if she was matched up completely with Conti at the start of the game, but certainly as the game went on, she found herself next to Conti at stoppages, and I thought was able to at least reduce her impact, if not, it certainly wasn't nullify. But I thought, like I said, she was just really clean, great hands up off the deck, and wasn't rushed, I guess. Like, she was taking her time in the right way. She found players when she needed to, and I think, this is for her a bit of a reward for effort, because as the seasons progressed, I think she's gotten better. Not high numbers, and she's still spending a fair bit of time on the bench, but when she was on the pitch, she was really clean, and I thought was a little unlucky in that a lot of the good work that she was doing came undone because others around her were a little bit sloppier and fumbly. So, which again, in the conditions is totally understandable. But I thought she was super, super impressive. So 2 votes to Ruby Tripodi, and then 1 vote to Erica O'Shea, same as Ruby. It's her first votes for the year. And these numbers are not going to jump off the page. 9 disposals, 4 tackles, 2 inside 50s, 6 intercepts. The tackle count, whilst it was only 4, some of those were crucial. She had at least 2 that led to holding the ball decisions. She set up the game-breaking goal that Bella Eddy was able to kick. She took an intercept on the wing, got back, sort of ran a bit of an arc, kicked a long bomb on her right foot that ended up in forward 50, which then led to a couple of hand passes and Bella Eddy's goal. So she played a massive part in that, and that was from her being proactive and taking the game on. 8 out of 9 of her touches were kicks, so she was moving the ball forward and just crucial in the wet. I think every disposal or impact, every time she touched it, it was super impactful. So I think probably her best game for the season. I think that similar to Tripodi, she was pretty clean. Whenever she touched the ball, good things happened. So it was hard to narrow down those last few. I think, like I mentioned before, Ferguson and Wright were both great as well, and easily could have also had a couple of votes. I think Riddell got better as the game went on, but it probably wasn't her most impactful game. She had a couple of classy handballs late, but not necessarily one of her best games for the year, and it's the first game that she's missed out on a vote from me. I think Mia King started really well, similar to Tripodi, but probably faded a little bit. It's probably a little unlucky. Bresnahan was fantastic off half-back, so any of those players could consider themselves pretty unlucky to not get votes, but unfortunately I've only got room for 4, so I've gone with Garner 4, Birch 3, Tripodi 2, and O'Shea 1, and that, just for clarification, is Garner best on ground. And I think for best opposition player, pretty easy. Conti was, like I mentioned, at times really unstoppable. 32 disposals, 8 tackles, 7 clearances, 470 metres gained, 9 intercepts. Just evasive, damaging, disposed of it in ways which gave her teammates heaps of time and space. Was easily best on field in the first half. And just, like I said, sort of second half, she still had some great moments, but wasn't as prolific. I think Ruby was able to stifle her a little bit, particularly at clearance. When the ball came out, I think, she's one of those players that just knows where to be. The ball kind of magnetised towards her at times, it seems. But yeah, unfortunately, or fortunately for us, but unfortunately for her, she just wasn't able to finish her work at times, or her teammates weren't able to finish her work because, boy, she's got a great kick. Her leg speed's fantastic. She's got great acceleration and really bursts away at times. So you can definitely see why the umpires noticed her and why she was able to pick up the AFLW Best and Fairest last year. She's very noticeable on the field and had a great game. Fortunately for us, not good enough to get her team over the line. So they're my 5 best on. That finishes out the North Podium voting. In terms of what the standings look like at this halfway mark, give or take, in the home and away season, I've got Jaz Garner now retakes the lead on 16 votes, Ash Riddell 15, Lily Birch outright third on 5 votes, and then it goes O'Loughlin, Sheila at 4, Kearney, Eddie, Mia King, Randall 3, Tripodi 2, Gat and O'Shea 1 vote. So that top 3 or top 2, Garner and Riddell, a long way out, and then there's a big bunch following them. But I guess that is reflective of this side. We've got heaps of really good players, some really great role players that aren't necessarily going to get votes all the time. That's where the standings sit. Before we jump into the negatives and positives, just a quick reminder, follow me on social media if you can, at NorthPod Show, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, X, all of those places. Subscribe on your chosen podcast service, leave me a review or a rating if you can, and if you would like to support the show any further, you can head to the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. It's just an additional way to show your support for me and for the podcast, and I appreciate everyone who supports the podcast. Let's head to the positives and negatives. I think on the negative side, the conditions were rubbish. So like the last several games, I'm going to use that as a caveat. But we did allow Richmond to play that they want to play early on for too long. They were handballing forwards and made Birch a little bit less useful rather than dumping it forward. And at times we just weren't first to the ball. We weren't getting those hands out. We weren't creating opportunities for our teammates or the way that we should be. And, Richmond was just finding space. They were able to get those 2-hand passes out to someone in some space who was then able to make a decision with some time, or at least they were able to, get the ball forward and get it into the area. So I think it probably took us a little bit longer than we would have liked to wrestle momentum from them. Eventually we were able to, but we had to be first the ball a little bit earlier on. I think the pleasing thing is that we were able to make those adjustments. Jenna Bruton was used as a sweeper, which without Emma Kearney there was a creative use of her. Garner resting forward at times was, a great deciding factor. She was able to go forward and take 2 marks inside 50. So I think some of those adjustments that we made eventually were successful and really useful. It's just around how long that took. Fortunately, because the game was so sloppy and the scoring was so low, it didn't take much for us to wrestle the score back into our favour and eventually, win almost comfortably, you would say. But I would have liked to see us be able to make those adjustments a little sooner. That being said, like I mentioned, having Kearney go down at the start really does a lot of damage to your structure, and then we had to sort of think on the fly, and I think it was great that Crocker was able to make a few decisions. I think like I mentioned, Bruton in that sweeper role that Kearney would often play was really useful, and potentially that's the way that we can use her for the next couple of weeks, because Kearney's injury, is likely going to be several weeks. I guess let's talk about that next. I mean, she's done her hamstring. To what extent, we're not sure, but at her age and this stage of the season, it's probably a little dangerous. I guess we'll get the scans and see what happens, but it's hard to know. I know that there will, and I've seen some people on social media already, there'll be talk about the condensed fixture and whether or not that's to blame. Either way, it's bad luck. However it's happened is not ideal. The thing that concerns me a little bit is that she was clearly so gassed at the end of the midweek game, and potentially was someone that we should have rested. So there's part of me that goes, look, the AFL has failed us because they've created this condensed fixture where we know that there are injuries happening to every team. But I also think that was within our control. We probably could have and should have given her a rest, knowing that she was so gassed, knowing that she's one of the older players. We gave Kate Sheila a rest. I think that potentially we might have made an error there. Everything's easy in hindsight. So, it's not a hangable offence by any stretch, but it is something that potentially we could have avoided. You do wonder what the AFL is going to do about this next year. I really, whilst I love watching footy, every night of the week, so to speak, it creates an issue, this condensed fixture. So hopefully next year it can be sorted out and potentially the season can go for a couple more weeks. Not just adding in a game. In terms of what we can do with Emma's injury, I mean, look, hopefully this is just an opportunity for Eliza Shannon or Lulu Pula to step up in the meantime and play, a role. They're obviously not going to be able to completely replace what Kearney does for us, but I think it'd be good to have those two rotating through that spot potentially. Bresnahan and O'Shea are going to need to continue their rebounding. But I'd say both of them had slower starts to the year, but they've been pretty good the last couple of weeks. So we'll need their drive without Emma in that back five, and hopefully we can get her right for finals. About 5 weeks away, so look, plenty of time so long as she doesn't have a recurrence of the injury. We play Adelaide in 3 weeks. I know there'll be a temptation to get her back for that. I wouldn't rush her back for that. Let's see what the scans say and then have a look at it. The other injury worry was Emma King. She looked a bit proppy at the end of the game. I don't have an update on that as yet, but she seemed to be doing a bit of a fitness test at the end of the game. Talia Randall had a big knock, but she went back on and seemed to be fine. So, look, hopefully those two tools are okay. And if they're not, let's get them right. Let's give them a rest because we certainly want them ready for finals. And that's the thing about the AFLW season. You cop an injury anytime other than the start of the year, and you start thinking about, well, how's this going to impact us come finals time? It's such a short season. It's 10 weeks long, 11 games. It's really important to stay as fit as you can. So hopefully it's just Kearney that's actually injured, and we can use this as a bit of a positive to get some other players, some fitness and some reps through those spots. The only other negative that I guess I'd like to talk about, there was a moment midway through the game, we've got the ball nice and locked deep inside our forward 50. Richmond take a mark pretty close to the goal line, and Neve Martin she didn't know the rules. She didn't remember or didn't know that she had to come back to man the mark at the edge of the goal square. It's a pet peeve of mine, these little nuances that players should absolutely know by now. Potentially she does know, and she's just had a bit of a rush of blood and's forgotten that and trying to press up. So look, I don't profess to know, but she did look genuinely confused. It's just one of those things, you don't want something like that to come up in a final because it was just such a pressure release. We've got the ball locked in there, and then all of a sudden, a 50-metre penalty in the women's competition in the wet is a massive, massive penalty. So hopefully the team learns from that. Hopefully everyone has a look at that during the week and recognises that we can't do that, because there was a moment later on in the game where the exact same thing happened, but because the Richmond player played on, the 50 wasn't paid. So we don't want that. It's just, it's a pet peeve of mine, those rules that we just should know because they're so technical and so straightforward though. Like, let's follow them. It's the same when players they're taking a kick after it's gone out on the full and they wander in bounds, and then it's surprised when they get called to play on. Like, the rule is once you're in bounds, you're in play and you play it on. But for whatever reason, there are players that don't know all of those nuances. So hopefully Neve now knows those rules, and hopefully everyone on the team knows those rules, because like I said, you don't want something like that costing you come finals time. You need to be you don't want to give the umpires any opportunities to penalise you for that kind of thing. So they're all the negatives. Pretty, pleasing game overall. It was trickier to find some negatives just because, after the start that we had, I thought it was a really, really positive game for us. So in terms of positives, I think, look, we were challenged by the weather. The opposition, Richmond, were playing quite well, particularly given they're down 2 of their stars. Katie Brennan's missing, probably a tougher game for her to have an impact, but she wasn't there. Hosking was out as well. I'm not sure if she was injured or just being rested. I'm not sure what the situation was there, but they had some players out, and I thought they played super well and really challenged us to start the game. We rose to the occasion in the second half and showed that we can do it. So it was tough going. We had a couple of great passages that led to those goals, and we were able to, set ourselves up. I mentioned the O'Shea setup from earlier on. She intercepted a long kick down to a contest. O'Loughlin crumbs it, hand pass to Garner, hand pass to Bella Eddy, who kicked a really nice goal. That was the backbreaker, or the moment that we went, okay, we've finally got it. Eddy had been threatening all day. Pretty unlucky to only have the one goal. I think, like I mentioned, she was threatening to kick 2, and it was great to have her finish off that fantastic work. There were several other times where, like every game, she just knows exactly the right moment to hit the front of the pack. Alice O'Loughlin has a pretty similar tendency. They're just really, really good natural footy players and know where to run to. Yeah, I think after that point, we started winning some cleaner clearances through the fourth. I thought King and Riddell, as the conditions got a little better, that's Mia King, were able to be a little bit more assured and damaging with their disposal. So overall, it was just positive that we were able to be challenged and actually come out on top. Whereas we know in the Geelong game, we were challenged and we scraped across the line with a draw. It wasn't a performance that you'd look back on and go, we overcame that challenge, whereas we definitely did in this game. And I just need to reiterate, I feel like it's been half the season talking about it, but the conditions were horrific. It was torrential rain in the first half. It didn't really rain the second half, but there was just so much water on the ground. So to fight through that, knowing that we're not great wet weather footballers, and also to fight through the fact that Richmond are a pretty solid side this year, I thought was impressive. The fact that we weren't able to get first ball use all the time, but still won the clearances, I think is a positive. Lost the hitouts 41-35, so relatively even, but another game where I think King and Rennie were probably slightly beaten at least. But we won the clearances 35-24, so +9 in the clearances. We won the tackles 97-85, another really high tackle count game, just again because of the conditions. But really, after quarter time, we were either getting first hands on it and winning the clearance, or we were not allowing the Tigers to exit cleanly. We were tackling them and keeping the ball in for a repeat stoppage, by and large. I don't know what the numbers looked like at quarter time, but it certainly wouldn't have been very favourable. I think as the game went on, we matched them and then were able to go past them. And, clearances haven't been a fantastic area for us this year, even though we've had some fantastic individual performances from midfielders. I don't know that our clearance work has been fantastic or consistent, so it was good that, in these conditions, you're never going to have super, super impactful clearances, but it's more around just getting the ball forward, getting into your area and then trying to lock it in and trying to create a score from that situation. I thought our setup around those stoppages was great. Like I mentioned before, Bruton was kind of sitting off the stoppage playing that sweeper role, and then we also had Birch playing kind of a kick and a half behind the play. So defensively, I thought we were set up really well, and that allows players like Riddell and Mia King to play pretty aggressively. And then in the second half, there was plenty of opportunities or plenty of times where Garner was resting forward or playing forward, and therefore you've got a really good contested player to just dump kick it to and let her go to work, which is exactly what she did. So yeah, I think besides Conti, every time she got her hands on it, it was, pretty clean exit by Richmond. Besides her, they didn't really have anyone that could effectively work through contested ball situations and win effective clearances. And I think, a really promising sign that our clearance structures were able to hold up both offensively and defensively, even though, we weren't dominating the hitouts like we were potentially in the first couple of games. And then the last positive, really, I mentioned it earlier on, the fixture does loosen up a little bit for us now. We've got 3 games coming up against sides that aren't currently in the top 8. We've got the Dogs, the Swans, and Essendon in the next 3 games. That's not to say we can take our foot off the pedal, but I think at least it might allow us to rotate a couple more players or rest a few players at a 50-50. I don't know that you want to be like proactively resting someone in that period, but And that's the thing about the AFLW. It's a big thing to lose a game because there are so few of them. But at least now, the last remaining good side or really good side that we've got to play are the Crows. We don't play them until week 9, which would be our 10th game. That's our last big test before the finals. We've got the Gold Coast in week 10, who are currently sitting last. So that Crows game is the next one that you'd be turning your attention to directly. But certainly, it's nice that the fixture opens up a little bit for us. And so far, we're handling that premiership favouritism, I think, pretty well, all things considered. I'm recording this on Sunday evening, so by now the round is finished, so to speak, for the AFLW, and we are sitting outright first. We're 2 points ahead of Brisbane. They're on 20 points. We're on 22. And Adelaide could also... In fact, Adelaide and Hawthorn are on 16 points, but they've played one less game. So in theory, if those two were to win their next game, they'd also be on 20 points. But Brisbane did beat Adelaide today in a bit of a nail-biter, which means that every team except us has now lost at least one game. And so therefore, whilst we have played an extra game to some of those other teams, we are out right on top. Our percentage isn't really going to matter probably because of that draw, but we've got a really strong percentage. So, first place is ours to lose now because of our run home. Like I mentioned, we do play the Crows in about a month's time, but those other 4 games we will definitely be heavy favourites for. We'd be expected to win, and hopefully we do so. Like I said, we've got Essendon, who are 9th, we've got the Swans, who are 11th, and we've got the Dogs, who are 12th currently, and all of those sides have won 2 games, either out of 5 or out of 6. So that's fantastic. The draw does open up for us a little bit, which is good, and hopefully we can take advantage of that, like I mentioned. And yeah, I think that's probably going to do us for our game recap. Great to get the win in the wet. A relief that we were able to do that after what didn't look like a great start to the game. But I think there'll be some relieved girls tonight or this week as you're listening to this, because they're able to get a full week or a full 6 days recovery in and hopefully attack the next game against the Dogs. In terms of any other news, not a heap to report. I mean, the AFL Grand Final was yesterday as I'm recording this, and Brisbane won that, belted Sydney. Not a great game, unfortunately. I mean, great if you're a Brisbane supporter, but not a great neutral game. So I guess all eyes sort of turn to Luke Parker now to see if he's going to commit to a trade to North Melbourne or wanting to get to North Melbourne. It certainly seems to be firming. It seems to be nearly a done deal in the eyes of the media. So hopefully that'll, I guess, get confirmed that he's actually wanting to come in the coming days. Now with the AFL season properly over, it's those sorts of things start to happen. So I guess that's one to watch before the free agency and the trade periods officially open. And I'll have an AFL men's focused podcast out later in the week, looking at the forward line review. It's the last area of the ground that we need to have a look at, so you can look forward to that later in the week. In terms of the next match for the AFLW, like I mentioned, we've got the Dogs next Saturday at 1 o'clock at Arden Street. So another home game. Hopefully the weather is better. Hopefully it's not shocking windy and wet conditions like we've had the last couple of games. And hopefully plenty of people can get along. The last few crowds have been a little bit quiet for, various reasons. They had the 5 o'clock game, which was not great. They've had a midweek game and they've had one of the worst weather events down in Launceston I've seen. So hopefully Arden Street, Saturday afternoon, football's finished. There can be plenty of people getting along to the AFLW and hopefully watching a big win for the girls. That would be fantastic. That is going to do it for me. As always, thank you for listening. Really appreciate your support. It's been great. I've been recording a few extra episodes because the AFLW has been happening midweek, and also it's school holidays for me, so a double win there. Probably be heading back towards more of a one podcast a week in the near future. But whilst I can, I'll be cranking a few extras out. And trade period looms. Crunch time in the AFLW season looms, but exciting times for North Melbourne because the women are winning and the men's side is hopefully going to get better with some trades and then later on some drafting. So exciting times ahead, and like I said, I'll speak to you later in the week. Go North! Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at NorthPod Show. I'm on X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.